Anyhow, uh, my mistakes aside, yeah, my friend was able to discern that there are quite a few dogmen here, and there are a couple of locations you just got to stay out of because they're too dangerous. Like there's a location south of here, about 20 miles, and it's approximately 2 miles west. Evidently, there's a family group of dogmen there that will make you disappear, so don't go there. And then just overall in the valley, there are of grass people. So grass people is what the my grandmother's tribe used to call them. And it was because of the way they slept. It was because of the way they housed themselves in the grass. They snuggle in under it, and you don't see them because they're covered. You'll see maybe one or two in an area at a time. Uh, I haven't seen more than that, but then I don't know a lot about dog people. I've only recently come in contact with a couple of them, and I've gone to the location where my friend's fight happened. At this point, I've been trying to, establish where the group is that he was aware of, and try to figure out how to contact them, try to figure out how to interact. If he could interact with them safely, then there's a potential that I can as well. But, that project kind of got halted this summer. That was going to be my summer project, and other things came up instead. So, anyway, on that note, there you have it. Hey, gosh, looks like this internet is spotty today. Lagging and jumping in and out, evidently. It's not just me. So, yeah, there are quite a few dogmen in this area, and they don't like being intruded upon typically. There's some down in the Umpqua, and the area they're in, I was warned out of by my mother, and then also by, the other individuals in that area have a tendency to try to warn you out of the region too because of the dogman up there in that Umpqua. And if anybody were to go missing in that area, I'd probably suspect him. There are still, pioneer stories about that particular group of dog people up there. Especially around the time mining started up there, there were a lot of encounters up in the Bohemian mine area. Back, when the mine was being developed in the 1800s. And that's something to note also, look into your mining areas, look into regions that have gravel pits, because typically you're going to find information from the past, usually in local newspapers of the time, about, logger gets chased out of the woods, miner gets attacked, mining equipment gets turned over, logging equipment gets flipped. So those sorts of things are things you can find in old news clippings, old newspapers, local gazettes, informational things. Sometimes you can even find information in your local Chamber of Commerce concerning cryptid sightings from the past. A lot of Chamber of Commerce were required to keep things like recipes, local occurrences, newspapers, that sort of thing, things of interest. So that's a good avenue to do some research if you're trying to find past history of a location. So when dealing with the dogmen, my best advice is try to avoid them. Some of them are very friendly and probably trustworthy, but I quite frankly don't know enough about them. I know that a lot of their communication is very similar to other, Sabe, which you call cryptids, very similar to Bigfoot. They communicate very much with Skookum or Guanch or the, Oma, other people, Yeren. They still use knocks, they still can handle things, they still can throw stuff at you. So trying to delineate sometimes what is around you is quite difficult. Like there's a gravel pit down south of here about 20 miles that I, for years, thought had Bigfoot in it of some kind. No, they didn't. It had a small family group of 4 dog people in it. I'm like, well, that's why they don't like to trade with me and they won't interact with me. They're standoffish. And the only reason why I was able to figure out what was there is because they had a bad interaction with a bunch of meth heads in the area. There were some meth heads who decided to camp right in the middle of the dog man's territory, and unfortunately, that was not a good thing for the meth heads. They got 400-pound rocks thrown at them. Scared them. They left. Big police report, no write-up in the newspaper, but definitely a known case in the area, and that was in a gravel pit, an old gravel pit that is no longer used. The one I live near, the Dogman I live near, actually had a gravel pit above that property line, just a few miles up. I don't know why they're attracted to gravel pits. The one that my friend encountered, the Tengu, which might be part of the Dogman family, I'm not really sure. Kind of like, I'm not sure about the Ishka. You know, those 3, they might be cousin species, or maybe they're not related at all. I don't know. But that encounter was in a gravel pit up in Centralia, Washington area. So gravel pits, I think, are a good place if you're looking for dog people or dogmen. I'd check out gravel pits and old mining areas because they seem to be around those types of areas a lot. Um, so sorry, it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to answer any questions. I can't get the chat feed to come up. I'm not sure what's going on, but at least I can talk from this side. Sorry about that. So, yeah, my project this summer was to try to interact with the group out that my friend had had his fight with, you know, the individuals group that had bothered him. And I did get out there. I did find the location again where the fight occurred. And I found some evidence, you know, digging evidence and some kanji, and started, I think, a small family group, maybe a couple of young and a mother, because I got skunk set it at, and my dog freaked the heck out. She wanted to scram like crazy, so we went on down the trail. Went out to the clearing where my friend said he used to meet these things. He'd sit with them on a bunch of sawn up logs that were out in that area that had been left from logging times. And I sat out there for probably half an hour. Finally got a whoop. Turned to look. A couple hundred yards away, there was a dog person standing at the edge of the clearing. So at least I've been able to confirm that, yeah, visually they're there. And then now I know which tree line to go look in. Not just the one I came through from the east and south, but there's one to the north as well that warrants investigation. But it's an area I have to have a vehicle to get into. No bus runs out there, so I can't do anything about that until I have a vehicle. So my advice for the winter, um, when you're dealing with cryptid research, everybody has a tendency to retire in the winter. They don't go out. And I always go out. Yeah, I do a lot of catch-up work in the winter because I have more downtime, you know, rain, you know, just unless you got gear, you're not going to go out there. But in the wintertime, there's less foliage, and it allows you to see what's hidden during summer. So I always go out to see if there are any structures I can find or any other evidence I can find during winter when there's not as many leaves on the trees and on, you know, the foliage on the ground. So it allows you to discern trails very easily, and it allows you to find other structures that you may not realize are there. The only thing that won't work in are conifers because conifers don't lose their, you know, foliage. So when you're dealing with sits and conifers, you have to look for kinds of evidence, particular types. So you'll find grasping evidence where cryptids will grab the bark, thicker bark of a tree to climb. So you'll get the same kind of evidence you get from raccoons going up a tree, but it's going to be hand-sized. And the other thing that you'll notice on trees that, you know, cryptids habitually go up, you'll find a ring indentation about every 4 feet. It'll look like somebody's been tying a rope around the tree and indenting the bark a little bit. That's where they grab the tree with the sides of their feet. So they're grabbing with their toe and their first finger on their foot because their feet act like hands. And that puts a different kind of track evidence on the tree. I haven't found any dogmen up trees, so I don't think they can climb. But every other species of cryptid that's more human-like, you know, they definitely go up trees. Everything I've noticed about dogmen seems to be ground related. They don't seem to go up trees. I don't know, other than them sleeping under grass, whether they go into, you know, caves of any kind. I know that bear people who look very much like dogmen build big baskets and live in the trees. I don't know if dogmen do something similar. I've never seen that. All I've ever found were them under grass, you know, curled up sleeping. Um, so I don't know much about their culture either. I know what my... Oh, yay, finally! Chat came here. Wow, talk about lag. Oh my god, I am so sorry, guys. This is a horrible day. My apologies, I can't help that. Let me find my glasses. So yeah, I don't know enough about their culture. I know what my grandmother said about them, and they were to be avoided. They, we didn't trust them tribally, from what I understand. So I don't have anything culturally to say about them yet. Hopefully I'll know more. I mean, the one that I interacted with down there in Douglas County, he was incredibly intelligent. Like, he could open your door. He could turn the gas off on a propane tank. I was far enough out, I just had electricity, but we did a lot of propane for like the refrigerator, cooking, and then there was a well for water. So it was very basic. And he'd lure me outside by turning the gas off on my stove while I was cooking. So that shows a level of intelligence that's far more human than you'd expect out of a dog. At least it was far more than I expected out of a dog. And you know, just the way he seemed to reason. I mean, I catch him napping. I could sneak up on him. I probably snuck up on him 4 times while he was napping during the day. My grandmother always warned me, if you ever sneak up on a sleeping dog man, don't touch him. They act out badly. They will probably attack you by accident, nothing else, because you startled them. Don't touch him. So that would always come into my head every time I was like 4 foot away, going, maybe I, no, better not. I left him food one day right next to his head, and then I kind of fell back to see if he'd wake up and smell it. He did, and I didn't want him to notice me, so oh, thank you. Uh, thank you. I like the eye color. I have to. I actually also eat bee pollen to keep them greener and clean. Bee pollen helps your eyes retain their color. Teaspoon a day, according to my grandmother. So, yeah, he reasoned. He had some very peculiar behaviors. You know, he ended up assisting me. He ended up killing the bear that we couldn't get out of there that was dangerous. Uh, and I assume that he ate the food that I left for him because when I went back, it was gone. Uh, but he wouldn't trade. And I know that the group he was with were mostly Oma. They looked like chimpanzees. So I think he might have been adopted or maybe the result of, you know, molestation. I'm not sure. He had a different attitude than the rest of the group. The rest of the group were very docile and non-bothersome. They didn't act poorly in any way, but they didn't trade either. I guess they had enough that they didn't need anything extra. But he liked to harass everybody in the area. He'd look in people's windows in that area. I have a friend who used to go to high school with a guy that lives on that same road, and when he'd visit there, he said, yeah, they would always be hearing howling, and they would hear growls, and they would hear all kinds of knocking, and things would be looking in the windows all the time up on that side of the property. And then just 2 blocks away down the road is where I lived, and the guy that owned property behind us, he was always shooting at the Dogman, but you never saw any other interactions other with the Dogman there. So he was a very active little brat in the neighborhood for sure. And I I guess there are instances where they take them in because there are a couple of actual groups of Skookum. There's a group of Skookum down south of here that have a Dogman with them, but they seem to utilize him like a point guard. Like he runs in the front of the group, but they definitely power knock and warn you to get out of his way. So there's some sort of a controllative issue there. I don't know if he's a hired gun or if he's a pet or if he's an enslaved individual. I don't understand the circumstances there, but that was one of the dogmen that the fellow that fought the dogman uh, told me about. He drove me down there one night and said, "Hey, you got to listen to this and see this." And it's down by a trestle area. So we showed up probably midnight, and we waited maybe 20 minutes. And the family group that has control of this light green, then their eye shine's about the color of a green grape instead of a lime. It's really light colored. And here comes this green-eyed something about, probably 8 foot tall. And my buddy's like, yeah, there it is. And he pointed out coming up underneath the trestle. And then because there's like a, not a refuse area, but there's like a construction or a tree trim site or something like that in the area, there's a big dumpster in that area. And as soon as they pointed out the green eye shine and this thing coming down underneath the trestle, you hear this power knock slam against the dumpster. And, it startled the hell out of me. He's like, yeah, 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 that thing's going to get closer too. And he's like, yeah, if it gets too close, I'm just going to back the vehicle up because I don't trust it. I'm like, yeah, I don't blame you. So it continued down through the trestle area, and then it stopped when it noticed us. And it was maybe 50 feet away. And I wasn't feeling too comfortable about this. And I could hear other things around. But it stopped. Another knock occurred, and it stopped in place. Like, it froze. Because it was looking at us, I guess, too long. So I don't know if it's an enslaved, you know, thing, or if it functions as a guard. I'm not sure. And then there's another group just west of there, maybe 5 or 6 miles. I think they are also Skookum or Huron because of their writing style. But they have like 7 dog people with them. But they seem to be teaching them because that's also in the teaching area, that one of the classroom areas. It's got a lot of classroom evidence in it. Uh, and then I can get up maybe 30 feet before they start warning me, and I'll be standing there and looking at these sets of green eyes looking at me. So I know they're grassland dogmen, but I don't get warned that they're dangerous until I get about 30 feet away, and they'll get a power knock say stop. But they don't growl at me. They don't hunker down. I can hear them sniffing the air like coyotes, 7 feet off the flipping ground sniffing at me. Um, and I've noticed other people they'll go back in that area because it's kind of a public area in one corner. And down in that area, every once in a while I'll catch sight of a dog walker that'll kind of shy away unexpectedly. And I haven't ever talked to anybody to ask them why they're shying away, but it makes me curious if they're, having some sort of an interaction as well. But that group I think they're training them for something. I'm not sure what. Because they are definitely being managed by another individual of some kind. Because the individual that manages them always knocks from up top of a tree while they're on the ground. Or he'll be up on a, I assume he will be up on a knoll, a hillside. So he's got visual line on him, but he, I don't know. I don't understand the circumstances there. So that's something to be noted. You might also run across evidence you can't explain, or sounds, or interactions that aren't going to make any sense. Oh, I'm 60. And yeah, for a 60-year-old, I still have muscle mass. I'm Native American. So, we stay a little more toned, I guess. Maybe just the way I live. I'm always out in the woods. Serbian, eh? Well, I do have a Russian background. My father was Mongolian, Russian, German, supposedly. So that might be another reason. We were originally from the Lapland, and then we went down into area between the Baltic and Caspian Sea. My grandfather was a direct descendant of giants, supposedly from that area. Red-haired people of some kind that were incredibly intelligent. Adam Vogel. Not familiar. So, yeah, I just talk about the cryptids of the area that I'm in and the research that I've done. I don't really reference other people. I've spoken with people like Meldrum, Dr. John Bendernagel. I liked him. He was a straight-up guy. I've talked to a few other individuals just briefly through emails, giving opinions or thoughts on things. But I don't really involve myself in the cryptid research world. I've always been kind of an independent with this. I've been trying to, over the years, match my, hereditary lore to what kind of creature the stories are about, and trying to make some sense of the things I've been told compared to what, physically is out there, potentially. And, there have been lots of stories here in the Northwest about dog people. In fact, in some of the Haida stories and some of the coastal native stories, they always have dogman masks as part of the story tells, you know, how they act and to avoid them, and don't forget they're in the woods with you. And that was something, my mom always took me to any kind of a traditional story tell that was available anywhere, you know. Yeah, we'd go to a museum and watch one, or we'd go up to OMSI, we'd watch one. We'd go to the dairy, I can't remember the place. Anyway, any place that had any kind of native lore, Mom was always there, always teaching, always showing. We always go to museums too. We'd look at the masks, we'd look at the evidence that had been found previously. We'd always, she'd explain to me anything that she understood about items like that, and, give me as much history and background as she could. So my life as a child was pretty much always a field trip on these things, for the most part. If I wasn't living next to one at home, we were out in the woods looking and interacting with them, and I was being shown locations. So the funny thing about this particular valley that a lot of people don't understand is the Applegate Trail that runs north and south throughout this valley actually parallels an ancient trading route that was established about 30,000 years ago when the ice started receding. There were just 3 fingers of ice that came down on this northern coastal range area. That's why we have the 3 mountain ranges in a row like we do with the valleys. So, according to my native lore, this was a trade route that went from South America all the way, originally before the Ice Age, all the way up to Alaska. We lost it, and then it was reestablished north by the snake people. And the route south was reestablished by the lizard people. The lizard people eventually became what we now know as the Maya, and the snake people became what we now understand as the Oglala. So those were my grandmother's stories about how the trail was reestablished. Those people followed the ice as it receded. And then there were other stories also during that time about how the the Sabe assisted us and protected us as we tried to reestablish. And they kept us safe from the white beings that were on the ice that cannibalized each other. Uh, so there's that. But here in this valley, in the mountains, you've got guanche. Down through the rivers, you've got guanche. It's same for Oma, Skookum, and Yeren. But the grasslands and the about 500-foot range are typically where you find Dogman. And you don't, other than along the waterways, you don't find the more human-looking ones. In the ponds and the lakes and the marshes around here, you'll find bear people and badger people, I think, and on some of the hillsides. I know a location where there's a badger man that drops down out of a tree. I gotta go up and get some pictures of him at night for you guys. Because his eyes glow really nice, and he gets within about 30 feet of me. And I'm pretty sure even without, night capability on my record, I can probably still get those eyes to shine pretty good on a night film. But this valley, it's loaded with them, and it's so weird because you know you can you there are so many cryptids along this coastal line and in this region. It is insane to think about. Like, we've got some of the weirdest stories of some of the strangest things. Oh, I wish I could read Hindi. I'm sorry, I cannot read that. And I don't have a way to translate it. I'm glad you're here, though. Thank you for being here. Because Hanuman, people of Hanuman live here. I am positive of that. And I think that culturally we need to understand these things for ourselves. I don't think governments are going to do this for us. I think they'd rather avoid it. And I think it scares them. I mean, uh, if you're thinking about these things, it kind of breaks the mold as to how we may have come about. It also breaks the mold of who's top dog, so to speak. I mean, they're incredibly docile or we'd be extinct. So, it's us. It's people on the ground. It's people in neighborhoods. I mean, like the the uh, the filming opportunity with just putting a camera on that sit in the tree right there in town. If somebody had the ability to put night vision on that thing, what kind of footage could you get? It climbing, it sitting there, it signaling, it jumping down. If people are aware of these things and don't freak out about them, realize they've been around us, they live in our cities with us. Just because we built a house on their property doesn't mean they're going to vacate their home. And we have to realize, the natives here understood that. The indigenous people here understood. We live around them. We live with them. They are here. There's nothing you can do about that. You either learn to associate with them and be safe, you ignore them and pray you don't get eaten, or you learn about the ones that are dangerous and you warn each other about them, and you learn to establish good relationships with the ones that can help you. And if my experience last night with that potential dogman coming through and the Skutkum's reaction to gather around this house like a little military sit, going, hey, we're Skookum, we're here, bugger off, buddy. If that kind of a relationship can be established, it was claimed that it could be in the past and that it had been done. And with what is potentially going on in our future here, and I don't mean just the United States, but internationally, our governments are beginning to abandon us. We're going to have to think about that. And quite frankly, I already got my plan. I'm going to go play with these guys. If stuff goes to hell in a handbasket in town, I'm not sticking around for that. I'll just go live with these people. They'll be able to guard. They'll be able to warn me. It's good advice. If you can learn to trade for a fish with these guys, uh, and learn the behaviors of them, there's quite a bit that we can gain. Not just determining whether or not they're real, because this technically we're talking about mythical creatures that don't actually supposedly exist. But, culturally, there are, cultures around the world, indigenous cultures, that are very aware that these kinds of things have always been here, and that's probably never going to change. So, uh, dog people. I haven't seen tool use except for stone tools, and that's only the stuff I've been told about and been shown. And I do find that kind of evidence, but I haven't found it directly yet where I can go, hey, I see that thing laying it down. So, no direct eyewitness yet. And that's something else. With all of the equipment that we have available to us today, it's not that the equipment is failing. Because, on, what was it? Bigfoot Encounter, whatever, that new program. I don't watch it. Friends have tried to encourage me to watch it, but every time I do, it's just painful for me to see because I'm like, if I had that kind of equipment, the kind of information I could gather by placing that equipment correctly in locations that would actually record what it needs to record, the things that could be learned are just insurmountable. You could learn movement behaviors, you could learn what they do in a group while they're sitting together. There are plenty of places that you could stick one of those cameras if you knew the place to put it. And it's not so much that we need to run around trying to incite things out of them. I think that's not the avenue. I think we have to look at this more as if we are tracking human beings, because that's always played out to be true. Anytime I've gone into the woods, it's always how I interacted with Jen Jen when I was a kid. I learned to track her on the ranch to find her, and then I learned to read the markers that she left, so I didn't have to track her anymore. She just told me where she went. And that's what I utilize. I utilize their markers, their communication to follow them, straight into an active blind or straight into their bed system. So I think it's those sorts of things we have to learn. We have to learn to read their markers so we can figure out where they are. Once we can figure where they are, then it'll be much easier to, place appropriate trail cameras that might actually capture something. But then again, they do like to tear up stuff. That's why I think maybe focusing on the ones that are in, near, or around towns are going to yield far more evidence than trying to go out into the deep woods. One, they're already familiar with you. Two, they don't care that you're there. They aren't watching what you're doing to go, oh, they might be trying to record me. It's not going to be in the front of their mind. There you go. Oh, humans doing something in their yard again. All right. They're going to ignore you. And that gives you an advantage. So, if you find them in your neighborhood, if you figure out where they're going and you can definitely catch them on a camera, even if it's something from inside your home, do it. That gives more evidence than what you're going to find running around acting goofy in the woods. You're not really doing anything. You're fanfaring yourself, but that's about it. You're not yielding any evidence. It's useless. It's perfunctory. Now, the things that I was told by Jen Jen about her own group, she claimed that they lived in homes that were upside down baskets, and that they wove them out of branches, and that they overlaid them with, bark or moss, whatnot, to keep a little bit of the rain off of them, and that they slept directly on the ground. She claimed that they didn't skin an animal by cutting the flesh, they peeled the animal backwards by hand, and that they would actually tan the hide by smoking it and rubbing it. The boots that she wore, and she made herself moccasins because she had clear skin on the bottoms of her feet, very tender, and she was prone to sunburning on her birthmark across her face and the bottoms of her feet where she had no uh, melanin in her feet, no pigment. So she made herself elk hide boots, and she used a drill to pierce the leather to work a four-plaid braid through that acted like a little rubber bandish kind of thing that would hold them on. And she'd used rawhide, simple rawhide stitching. So when I spoke to John Vendernagel, he said there had been plenty of sightings of all kinds of cryptids carrying tools or wearing clothing, wearing jewelry, having feathers in their hair, uh, wearing shoes. He even had accounts of dog people wearing a rudimentary form of moccasin boot. I've heard about that. I've never seen it. I do know of one Ishka that comes through the valley, and I think he's a runner because he comes through one of the Skookum territories, and he will stay with the Skookum group for a couple of days and then he leaves. And he wears grass sandals. And I know I've seen grass sandals in the Ishka Janaskwa cave that my mother put me uh, in the 1976 here in Oregon. That was one of the things she wanted me to look at was the owl, the spike that they use, because they'll sharpen a piece of wood really, really, really fine, like a needle sharp. And they'll use that as a piercing tool to go through leather and grass when they're weaving it. And I found one of those in the cave where the Janaskwa was, and part of a sandal that he'd been working on, he was still braiding it and lacing it together. And when I picked it up, I forgot. He pushed me. He wasn't happy that I had touched his stuff. My mom had warned me, don't touch anything. And he almost pushed me off the cliff. I had to grab rock to stay in there, and then I turned so he wouldn't go at me. So these things, some of these cryptids make items. Uh, so to me, to say that these things are purely animal, that they're disease-carrying creature that needs to be exterminated, or that they're genetically inferior because of the way they look or act, I think we are way out of bounds on that. I think we really need to step back and take a look at this from a more, personable perspective. Look at it in a more realistic way. In that, accept that they're there, realize that they're there, and then go find the evidence that says, yeah, they are. Because governments aren't going to do it. Researchers aren't going to be able to do it. They aren't looking in the right avenues. Even the researchers that are on the ground scientifically look at these people like, Jeff Meldrum. Oh, he's a big primate. Really? Primate that makes tools, uses language, writes, uh, reasons, sews. Hmm. Somehow that's an animal? Well, so are we. So, in order for the understanding of these things, I would say examine your mythologies first. Learn what the mythologies say. If you've got a particular interest in a particular type of cryptid, understand as much as you can about that cryptid. Read as much as you can. Go out into any area where there's a sighting of them. Pay attention to any local lore of dangers. any differences in what they look like. Because some of the Haida masks show some of the dog people as having different colored faces, and then other masks show them as completely haired. So to me, that says they're potentially interacting with two different species and thinking they are. Today, we think they're the same species, but in their lore, the tribal lores of those two tribes, the name is different for that creature, as is the mask. That's same with any Bigfoot masks too. They'll have different colors, they'll have different names. I think they're specifically talking about different species. I think we've generalized them because we've lost too much information from the past, and we're generalizing terminology now, and I think that's befuddling our potential understanding of them. Because we go, oh, Bigfoot, everything must be a Bigfoot if it's in this category. Or we go, oh, Dogman, everything must be a Dogman if it has a tail and looks like a dog. But it could be, a baboon species. It could be something else. So that's something to keep in mind, distinguishing the species and then trying to map what your evidence is. Because, like the Skookum, they use a lot of cedar tools. They utilize atlatls, they use spears, they do clay pottery, according to my grandmother and my mother. I've never found any of it, but I've been told that they make clay pottery. I know that they use the little burn pit, the Native American smokeless fire pit where you build a fire underground so that it creates a flow of air so it's always hot but doesn't create new smoke. So that suggests they've got a cook pot. Why else would you make a fire pit like that? And it was actually a native person that pointed that out to me. He was a homeless individual that I spoke to. He says, oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I saw this and I heard this in the area when I was camping down there, and I want you to check it because I think it's got to be a native person down there or something else, but it was too big. It's got to be a sabe. And yeah, I found tracks. I found the pit. So yeah, just talking to each other also. If you ever hear something like a kid saying, "Well, Mom, do dogs bark at monkeys when they're in the backyard?" Don't call a kid crazy. Listen to that kid. The kid's seen something. Or when somebody says something off to the side, yeah, my friend had drawings on her vehicle. We don't know if it's a neighbor's kid or whatnot. Because there's a gal in this area I've had interactions with for many, many years. And she lives out of town, like 26 miles out of town, south and west of here, out beyond Crow and No Tying out in that area. And for years, there's Sabe come through her property. She's got dogmen that she's seen, and they'll draw on her vehicle on the dust. She always leaves her vehicle dusty, and she's got pictures. She's taken pictures for years of all the funny little drawings. Sometimes they'll depict like location, they'll be like trail signs. Sometimes they'll depict dinosaur or very unusual looking animals. Other times there'll be spirals or handprints. So it's things like that, that's some physical pass-through evidence that's consistent. It happens to her vehicle. She says at this point she's considered putting in a camera just to see if she can catch what's going through her property and messing with her vehicle. See how much footage she can get of it. I keep trying to tell her she should do a YouTube page. I think what she's got is warranted for that. I mean, she's got lots of footage. And there are plenty of people in this area alone. People have encounters all over this valley and have for generations. People see them in Portland. I mean, there have been incidences of the Sabe running down streets in Portland. There was an incident just before I moved to Washington of a Bigfoot running down the highway during rush hour. So they're around, you know. But I don't think they're as dangerous as everybody claims. I don't even think that the dogmen typically are as dangerous as most people think. But there are some species that might be, and there are some things that we need to know. And that's probably going to be on, custom and species behavior. What my mother warned me, don't do certain things in certain areas. I mean, you can relieve yourself in these areas and they're not going to be angry at you. But if you go in and you tear up their property, if you destroy something of theirs, they're probably going to hold a grudge. And those sorts of interactions, I think, are probably why we've gotten negative interactions. Either we've destroyed something of theirs, we've harmed someone of them, and maybe we harmed a child, or maybe we stole a kill from them and didn't know it, or maybe we trespassed in their minds and we're stealing from them by hunting. I think the negative interactions are because we don't understand them well enough to know when we're making a mistake. And that's something I think that we can culturally solve by paying attention to past lore and then judging what we understand when we're in our areas and accurately communicating with each other, the relevance to certain behaviors, things that you notice that set them aside from other animals, uh, behaviors of assistance, for instance. The firefighter that got picked up and carried out of the fire a couple of years ago. That's happened more than once during fires. Forest fires and Bigfoot sightings kind of go hand to hand. Um, and also consider the more we think that we use more land than we do. We don't. We use 12% of the overall land of the world. We don't really know anything. We know squat, to be honest. But, now we're kind of encroaching again by adding more buildings. They're adjusting. It's We're going to be pushing on them, and they're going to probably be coming more and more into our cities. You see, the less we leave for them to forage in, the more they're going to come dumpster dive. I've seen that happen more than once. Like there's a group here that for years, this local government, ever since the sighting occurred and they shot the old woman that I talked to, the Oma woman who was a matchmaker, the city council here decided she was a dangerous animal, and they killed her. They had her shot. And they've been putting pressure on that particular Oma family group since. They've went in, they've destroyed the markers, they've taken out their stone boundary markers, they've gone to the extent of destroying 65% of their food resources, their edible plants in that area. They've intentionally dried up springs in that area by building over the top of them. Uh, they've cut down all of the old growth trees, claiming, oh, those trees were never ever supposed to be there. All it's doing is pissing that group off. This last winter, when the freeze happened, they knocked down probably 30 trees straight down into the city. I don't think they're leaving. I think their next avenue is going to be right into the middle of town. And I think they're bringing friends. So that's something to consider. Don't try to manage them like they're animals. They won't take it. And I'm going to be watching that area. Because some of the other things, some of those logs aren't broken in the correct patterns. They picked them up and they've moved them. They've intentionally placed them. And to me, it looks like a pathway straight down into the back of a neighborhood. I don't want to be there. So consider that, they're not going to go anywhere. You poison them out, that's all you can do. And that's going to piss them off because they understand poisons. Bear Woman's a good example of that. She seems to be a very proficient individual with cures and poisons. I mean, I found one of her little storage places, and I'm not going to stick my hand in it. I've done that in the past to other locations and dang near get spiked. Some of them were poisonous spikes. Some of them are set at eye level. They're not going to get you in the hand, they'll get you in the face. So be really careful if you're trying to investigate anything like that. Be aware that Dogmen and any other of these Sabe people, Bigfoot people, what you think are just gorillas or whatever, they're smart enough to set traps. They're smart enough to use poison. So they're smart enough to be reasoned with and understood. And that could be a big advantage for our cultures. Because, if we can reestablish what my grandmother spoke of, or what Uncle Ong spoke of, where we actually interacted and lived daily with these beings around us, maybe there's some unique future for us where we don't need governments, to be honest. Well, anyway, that was the old story. The old story was that we governed ourselves because we all lived together and we were not separated. But that was the advantage of being one island, Pangaea. Now we have separation. And we have, a lot of lore that's been lost, a lot of history that's no longer around. Hey dogs, how you doing? I figure I'll keep this going for about an hour. I do have to get to work some point today. And sorry for the earlier glitch. Looks like the internet's back to kind of working again. So yeah, I don't know as much as I'd like to know about certain beings. I do know that the Oma, Guanch, Skookum, and Yaren all live very much like we would live. They live in structures on the ground or structures in the tree lines, in trees, that they utilize tools, that they have social structure where they teach legends and lore to their children. They teach them language and they teach them hunting tactics and reasoning tactics and the understanding of, behavior, what's good behavior, what's bad behavior. So they're very much like us. I would assume that dogmen are similar to the bear people and the others that have already come around. Hey, Ruben, how you doing? Some of you I haven't been able to get emails from. I think it's just how glitchy the internet has been in this area recently. There's been a lot of military fly-throughs and a lot of, I think, probably exercises going on. And when that happens, the Wi-Fi always gets dodgy as and sometimes it'll last for a day or two, and sometimes it'll last for 30, 40 minutes, so it's always kind of peculiar. Sky, when you say bear people, is it a cross between bears and squatch? Potentially. I don't know. My grandmother didn't have any stories about how they came into being, only that they were something we were aware of. And I don't know of any legends about how they came into being. But, you know, the the things that I was told by Jen Jen about how and what I saw. I mean, she was molested by a Gugway, that looked very human, had a bald head, looked very primate in the body, and had human, hands and feet, except primate feet. But fingernails, I mean, human fingernails. And what was produced between her and him, and she looked like a big chimpanzee and had very same or similar hands and feet, except, oh, excuse me, he had claws, she had fingernails. So he looked more human in the face than she did, was bald, had claws, but it had the human-like hands and feet like her, primate-ish, but still had the very tactile, fine movements. Gorillas and whatnot don't have as fine movements as these guys seem to have. They can pick up smaller objects, even though they got really big hands. But what was produced was a dog man. The fetus was about 5 months along, so it was about 6, 8 inches long, and the head was maybe inch and a half, 2 inches long. and it looked like a little dog. I mean, it had kind of raccoon looking front hands. It had claws like its father. It had a tail, had a very dog looking face, looked like a little um, shepherd, and it definitely had a spine that allowed it to stand upright because I did work the body to see. It didn't have any rigor to it yet. It was pretty fresh. She'd miscarried it maybe an hour or two before I got there. Um, but it didn't look anything like the parent. And that was something else. Uncle Ong, his stories claimed that, you know, life came about because of a kind of a triplet nature to our reproduction somehow. He claimed that in the stress beginnings of creation, things were able to crossbreed with each other and it would create new life forms. And I think that what we call Bigfoot, cryptids, I think they fall in that category of they don't always produce what they cross with. Sometimes they get throwbacks or they get something else out of it. So I don't know if it's like some sort of a recessive gene issue, because that's a possibility. When you're looking at it genetically, maybe they've got a dominant recessive gene issue going on that is like unlike ours. Because we also have dominant and recessive genes. That's why you end up with red hair from a grandparent or green eyes from a grandparent, and it's not something else. Your parents, maybe both your parents are brown-eyed, and you have one green-eyed grandparent, and because it's a dominant recessive gene, boom, you got them. It gets you keyed in genetically. So I don't know if there are factors like that are going on, or if it's more like what Uncle Long said, and it's just that they can all reproduce with each other. And if they can reproduce with us, that means them and us are all part of the same family group. Because animals can only reproduce with the same genetic line of creatures. So that would mean that all those critters are part of our family genetics. So that bears some question as to what we are, because according to Gen stories and a lot of Native American stories, we are the result of a Sabe woman and a Dogman father produced us humans with no hair. And if that lore is true, then there's something completely different than the legends we've been told. Let me do some questions here. Hey, Sky. Oh, you live on Kodiak Island in Alaska. There's a lot of activity up there. I don't see many people. Yeah, there's a lot of what goes on in Alaska isn't reported down here. A lot of people are not aware of how much, Sabe activity goes on in Alaska, like all over Alaska. I wish there would be, more native people. That's part of the reason why I like How to Hunt. He's one of the few people that talks about him up there. And I know he's doing his own research, and I know he's, dealing with natives up there. But he reads, other people's stories. He doesn't focus on what's there. It's probably because, he's dealing with his stuff or doing his thing. But I kind of watch him because of the fact I know from the natives up there, there's a lot. I mean, I've talked to natives that hunt on the ice floes up there, and yeah, they say they deal with all kinds of creatures up there. Bear people, Sabe people, occasionally unusual things they haven't ever seen except in, heard of in lore. So there's that. I wish there would be a native person or somebody in Alaska that would start telling more about what's up there. Because there's some amazing stuff up there. I want somebody to talk about the uh, the Sabe that turned the trees upside down and sing to the northern lights to make them interact. I've heard lots of Sabe related stories from native people about that, and I would love to be able to see it. I know it's dangerous to go up and sneak in that area and get any kind of sightings of it, but I do know a couple of people who have done that and seen it themselves, so I have no reason to doubt what they say to me. Okay, let me read another one here. So, dogs. My grandson's seen a half bear, half snake behind me. I couldn't see it, but it scared him. Yeah, there are some reslands have, lizard people on them, and Vancouver Island's got lizard people on it. Uh, they got a sighting of one of those things that's that drawing, and I don't trust those things. I think they're probably pretty predatory towards us. Uh, I definitely felt like I was prey the night I saw that thing. Hey Sky, tons of activity. I have fingerprint on my bedroom window. Ooh, powder that and get some tape. You know, if you powder that with just a face brush, you can do it with makeup. Believe it or not, you can do it with just basic stuff. You can use talcum powder and a face brush. If there's any oil left on that print, you powder it, it'll show up. You put a piece of wide scotch tape across it, you can pull that print right off. And you can put it on a piece of paper and preserve it. If you have that done as a regular, you know, I'd keep the window clean so that you get prints if that's a regular. And I would invest in a little $30 fingerprint kit so you got some black charcoal powder to work with. Because the easiest way is you just grind up some charcoal and you can dab it with a real fluffy light brush. It has to be real light, fluffy brush or you'll disturb the print too much. And you can go online and learn how to do fingerprint evidence lifting. It's a very easy process. I did that once on my motorcycle tank because somebody had tried to steal my motorcycle and the cops weren't going to do anything about it, so I provided them with 3 fingerprints and said, well, now you can find the guy. Okay, so let's see if there are other questions. Ah, well, it doesn't matter if you move. They're probably going to be Sabe or some other thing in the area. Anyway, I mean, the planet's old. You have to think this planet is 6 billion years old. How many life forms have been on it and are still on it? I mean, we know really little about it, actually. We know, what, about 5% of what's in the ocean and maybe 2% of what's on land and about half a percent of what's in the ground preserved. So there's a lot of play there. Yeah, any of you guys that locals tell stories to, it's kind of my position. People figure out that I have an interest in these things, and then, hey, I got a friend who said blah blah blah. They'd like to ask you some questions, or hey, could you come look at this? I don't know what it is. So I get a lot of my leads. In fact, all my leads are from local people. I don't elicit information from people. It's usually volunteered once they figure out what I'm about. Tragic Alaska Squatch. Oh, cool. Thank you, Sky. Okay. In Ketchikan, I have a friend up there I haven't talked to in years. He told me some very interesting stories about stuff up around the Ketchikan area. Wow. Lucky. In Wyoming, you get to live there, Crow Reservation. Nice. Yeah, I would love to see more res people do pieces on these guys. I'd love to see more lore. being exchanged and told because it might help everybody kind of understand. Because I think, we've become so separated time-wise from the stories and culturally. Natives still have the stories, but white men, sorry, you guys don't, you aren't privy to the stories. And I think if us red men would start sharing our stuff a little bit, maybe we can help each other on this one. Awesome. Yeah, and I don't know, somehow I would like to try to build a on my community section because I'd kind of like to have people be able to share photos or stories of their own so that we can start comparing notes with each other. And I got to figure out how to do that. So that's something I'm going to be working on next, trying to get the community page up on this YouTube thing so that we can start interacting. I mean, if we can start talking to each other about what we're finding concerning, bear people or badger people, once we can visually recognize what they are, then we can start building kind of reference information on each species and we can start correlating, past native lore to the species. Maybe we can recover that information. Maybe there's still enough left that we can regain our knowledge and it won't be permanently lost because of the situation we live in today. So, and that kind of came to me with one of the gals that when I first put this page up, I didn't realize there were any badger people left anywhere else. I thought that the one or two that I knew of here was it, because I was always under the impression, from everything I'd been told from my father, there weren't any more left. And then somebody was able to share a few pictures on their community page that very clearly let me see an entire group of them sitting in a bush line together back east, I think of Michigan. So I'm like, oh my God, they're really around. And then also the face eater, unfortunately, that fucking thing is still around. Evidently, there's problems with it down south in Mexico. And another individual let me know that evidently it's still back east in the same region or a similar area it had been when our family had its encounter in the Pennsylvania regions. So that right there tells me that what I'm doing is valuable because it definitely has allowed me to understand that yes, some of these things that I thought were completely mythical and no longer uh, applicable are actually around. And that being said, then how many other mythic creatures that I don't have family lore of are still around in our world? And how we can actually promote our own education by working together and sharing, basic stuff. We don't have to think about the idea of, I'm going to be the first one to discover it. If we all discover it, it can't ever be rejected. If somebody discovers it, that individual can be killed. That individual can be removed. Their information can be thrown away. But can you do that to 1,000 people? Can you do that to 100,000 people? Not so easy. And I think strength in numbers is probably the only way we're going to be able to bring these people to light. Bring these creatures, whichever end of the perspective spectrum there you want to be on. To me, they're more people-like. With the fact that they communicate the way they do, with writing, they have language. No, they're people. So, if we can start building our own reference materials, uh, that takes government and colleges out of the loop, and that puts them having to actually refute and publicly deny what we might come up with as a group. And I don't think they'll be able to refute it, you know, once we figure out how to establish, connections between each other and behavior to species. I don't think that tidal wave could be stopped. Yeah, but it's probably going to take many, many years. I don't think this is going to happen in my lifetime. I think this is maybe just a first step. Unless, we get out there in the field with a bunch of DNA kits and we all start testing subtle DNAs and we build our own library of DNA tests. There's also that potential. That's something I've been batting around in the back of my head. Because there are a few labs where you can, just buy a test kit and it has 100 different kit tester units in it that you can test water, soil, or do direct swabs with. You can even swab a fingerprint for oils and get DNA. So, if you got a tester kit like that, yes, they're expensive, uh, but they are something that you can just throw in the mail. You go get your test done. You get your results in about 10 days. It's all run automated. You can test for unknowns. And if we could start building a reference of unknown DNAs in each of our areas, maybe we can start delineating if those unknowns match anything. Otherwise, you do have at that point a whole bunch of on paper DNA evidence suggesting there is an unknown creature in your research area. And then it would be somehow, potentially, if you could set up a device where you could maybe get them to interact with something under film, and you could get a DNA sample as a result of that interaction, that's a potential avenue without having to physically harm one of them, to maybe be able to refute anybody who says, oh, no, 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 no. Because at that point, you'll have a camera on them maybe taking a bite out of something, and then you send that apple immediately to the lab. That right there would give you both ends of that perspective. It works in every other case. But that might, at that point, give enough kinds of suggestible evidence that, maybe science would get involved and actually do something, or biologists would get involved and actually fess up. I don't think that the government is unaware of them. I don't think there's any government on this planet that isn't unaware of them. In fact, there's so many rumors of them, some of them having been in military facilities or in military ranks. They're just too much. Too much. It's kind of like the UFOs. There's just too much out there that says the government's just covering stuff up and they're not wanting to deal with it. Maybe they think that we're all going to be terrified out of our wits or something. I, I don't think so. I think they're being silly. I think that's more of a control issue. Sort of like the colleges do. If you go into a college professor's room that isn't open-minded and you say anything about this topic immediately, you're public enemy number one. They won't let you do that. They've got their own biases and they like them. And besides, I've had professors point blank and other people in that end of things point blank saying, well, if we would have to rewrite too many books just to publish that kind of information. Like, well, maybe just publish new books. Let the old ones that are no longer relevant become dusty. Yeah, we do have to start somewhere, dog. So I think it's got to be with us. Even talking to Bender Nagel, I mean, he was hoping, and I was in at ground level when they were doing the DNA tests through Ketchum. I had offered some of my samples, and he said, no, save them. They already had over 100 samples. And he was pretty convinced that, once that paper was published and once that information was revealed, it would be an easy go forward. No, it got her long-term career destroyed in a heartbeat, and all because of prejudice. That's the other possibility. Maybe this is just a case of being prejudiced against a human species that doesn't look like the rest of us. And that's an avenue we can actually fight our governments with. Anyway, my thoughts on it may not be the same, but as anybody else's. But we've got to do something about it. It's not something that science is ever probably going to do anything about. I mean, all they ever want to do is just create evening soap opera shows about information. They don't really go out and learn anything or do anything. They run around, screaming at the trees, hoping that the trees scream back. It's kind of silly. So if I get a chance to get out into the Dogman area, once I get a vehicle, I'd planned on this summer trying to establish communication with them. Ended up instead establishing communication with the Skookum on the hillside that I live on currently. But as soon as I can get down into the valley and out into that region where my friend had the fight with the Dogman, I'm going to be trying to, interact with that group and see what kind of evidence I can find in their area. I know they do the whole hole digging with a stick like every other cryptid, so that's not anything that's going to delineate them as different. And they still have a scent gland, evidently. I didn't realize that. I know that almost all the females and some of the males that I've run across have a gland, and they will scent when you scare them too close to their young, or when they're a juvenile male and you sneak up on them too soon by accident, they'll freak and scent. Uh, it, but then again, the human body has scent glands that we don't use. They're kind of like our appendix. So again, that kind of suggests in the back of my head that maybe the stuff that doesn't function in us once functioned in them or in one of our previous, you know, what we may have come from. You know, did we boil down as originally being primates and we became more human and we lost the function of those organs, or were we simply the result of two different kinds of creatures mating and we didn't end up with those organs functioning because it's our genetic issue? There is that possibility. Maybe it's the reason why we're hairless. We lost the function of certain glands and our appendix, and we lost our hair. That'd make Adam and Eve look like a chimpanzee and a dogman, though. I don't think a lot of people could handle that. I think that might freak them out. But, yeah, jokes aside, I'm pretty sure it's a division in our government, actually. And I'm going to venture my guess this way, because I've seen too many military guys in my research areas over the years. Now, some of them look like governmental plain clothes, but a military guy always got a certain kind of attitude and a certain kind of walk, and it doesn't matter what kind of clothes you put on that, you're gonna know them because you've always seen them. So, the thing I've noticed, it seems like one side of this, and I think this is all corporate military. I think this issue of cryptids being covered up, I think it's all in that, corporate end of our military. What do you call that? The Great Machine? That's what some of the old timers used to call it. And the military industrial complex is another way of referring to it. So when you have industries wanting information, they don't want to share it. So they utilize the military to safeguard their interests. I think that is what is going on. But again, I think there is also a faction within our government, probably more like-minded to what maybe Roosevelt was trying to accomplish, preservation-wise. I think there's also a faction inside that governmental structure somewhere that is more friendly towards and more amenable towards the understanding of these things. But I think that currently there's too much corporate control. I think that's actually more of the issue. There's too much corporate control of our military and our government, and the information is not being released because of corporate controls. You know, they want to be the first on the list to have a new species identified under their corporate name because then they could patent it and they could do all kinds of shit to it. So also consider that, you know, maybe it's more of a something we're not, something more subtle that we're not quite recognizing. Because, you know, these creatures had been at one time, all of these cryptid creatures, everything that we consider big man, dogman, Bigfoot, dogman, etc. At one time, they were on tribal rolls. So they were recognized as humans at one point in time until the Jackson Wars, you know, 1830s, 1838. When he took them off the rolls, claimed they were no longer people, and they started hunting them, I would say that would be where the governmental fissure, that's where the break occurred. Because before that, they were just protected under the Natural Man Act and left alone. So I think if we're going to be looking at a governmental issue, it would be during that Jackson thing. You know, the Jackson genocide has never stopped for those people, for the Sabe, for the Bigfoot. They're still being genocided. And it's because the other half of the government isn't standing up for them. So there's some sort of power play going on there that isn't being resolved. That's keeping that from being revealed. So I'm assuming I'm probably needing to head downtown. I gotta get going to work. Great talking to you guys today. Hopefully I didn't get too far off topic. I wanted to keep it on the Dogman, but I don't have enough information about them other than I know they're flipping everywhere in this valley. And once I get a vehicle, I will be definitely out in the swamps west of here and in the marshlands because there's all kinds of neat stuff out there I really want to show you. And I really want to make a connection with that group out there. I really want to know more about them because I don't know enough. So, everybody have a great day and thank you for attending. And I will be putting up some more of my older information off my computer. Sorry for the quality of some of this because I don't have a way of putting stuff up from my computer directly. I don't have any internet here. I have to go just kind of take pictures. I apologize for that. As soon as I have an ability to be in town where I can actually upload stuff from my computer, maybe I can do that way, but I don't have that ability right now, nor do I have enough time currently to invest in that, unfortunately. But Saturday, I guess I haven't switched yet. I'm going to see how long I can keep doing this before I run out of time. You know, before my schedule gets too crowded. So I'll just keep it on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and if it gets too crowded, I'll probably cut it down to one day. I'm not sure which. So I'll keep you posted. Everybody take care, and thank you again. And I'm really happy for your feedback. I'm really glad to have some of the questions I've had. It's really got me thinking on some things and got me going on some new avenues I hadn't thought about or considered before. So keep them coming. I love it. And have a great day, everyone. Take care. Later, laters.